Okay, so welcome to the closing session of this first day of the seminar. The theme of this session will be slightly, well, definitely related, but also slightly different than the themes that we have already discussed. We are going to talk about digital preservation of film materials. So we have invited a distinguished panel, but we also we originally, I have to say this, we were hoping to have Richard Wright on this panel. Richard unfortunately couldn't be here, but he was kind enough to suggest us another solution, and he collected 3 testimonials, video testimonials from colleagues around the globe. But before we're going to watch those 3 video testimonials, we're first going to introduce the people on stage, and maybe we can start with Sarah here.
Yeah, hi. So my name is Sarah Vandegeerde, and I am head of audiovisual operations at INA. So that means that I'm responsible for all digitization activities in video, radio and film, as well as off-air recording within the framework of legal deposit. So INA has been responsible for audiovisual legal deposit in France since 1995, and today we are recording over 200 TV and radio channels daily.
Thank you. And next is Piero Costantini from Mnemonica in Rome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I am the CEO and founder of Mnemonica, one of the sponsors of this beautiful event. And yeah, Mnemonica is a cloud platform made for preservation in a different scale, let's say. We are delivering the product more in a peer-to-peer living producers or content owners create their own environment for preservation of their rights.
Yes, thank you, Piero. And next, last but not least, I would say, Stephen.
Hello. So I mentioned this earlier, but my teams manage the digital preservation in the BFI National Archive, and that's the lead body for film, the National Collection for Film and Television and all the other kinds of moving image. And just to put some flesh on that, we have film in the collection from the Victorian era. We have Queen Victoria walking around on film in 1895, right through the television, many eras of television, right up to streaming platforms. And that's our current, where we're at. We have Netflix and Amazon Prime Video and, as of this week, Disney Plus in the collection. So it's from 1895 until now, across all audiovisual domains, is within scope for our digital preservation.
Thanks. We're now going to watch the 3 clips, and the first one to start is someone very well known to many of us, I think, Anne Gant. She's working as a preservationist at the Film Institute in Amsterdam.
Hi everyone, I'm Anne Gant. I'm the sector manager for collections at Film Museum here in Amsterdam, and I'm going to tell you quickly what we do with digital films here in the collection, but I also want to speak a little bit from my hat as head of the FIAF Technical Commission about the broader issue in the film archives worldwide. But first, in Amsterdam, we have been collecting digital films since 2012, and now we have about 5 petabytes under management. We're collecting about 120 films a year, and that includes features, shorts, and also recently series. These are the films that are partially paid for by the Dutch Film Fund, and as a result of that, they have to send a master copy to us to get their final payment. So it's not exactly like Library of Congress, a completely copyright deposit agreement, but we do manage to get many of the films that are produced here because most of the films get some sort of film funds funding. Of course, it's a very different job for us than looking at analog film. We had to set up whole new workflows, digital workflows, and also hire people that understood how to check digital films. For us, what's better about it is that we're able to get a really top quality copy of the film at its outset. So a copy can be made for distribution and production, and a copy can be sent to us right away. And that's very different than when we used to get analog copies, because pretty often we would just get the answer print, and pretty often we would get the first answer print, so it wasn't exactly the best copy of a new film. So we're very happy about this digital workflow, because I think we're creating a very high quality collection of the recent Dutch films that are able to send us a digital copy, because it's a DCDM, it's uncompressed. We also get a ProRes. We're getting all the different files that are associated with the film. So that makes me really happy. It's a very healthy collection. What's harder and different about it is, of course, the reaction time that we require for digital films is much, much quicker than the reaction time for receiving films on pallets. So we try to get the people who are looking at the digital films to review the films in the first couple days that they come in, maximum about 2 weeks, because we want to get back to the post-production house if something's missing as soon as possible, just in case they delete the files. With a print, we don't mind if it stays in storage on the shelf for a while longer before we look at it. The other thing that's harder and different about digital files is the eternal migration, and this sort of commitment that you have, this sort of addiction to digital. Once you're on the train of doing digital preservation, you're hooked, right? You have to do it forever, and that's really tough for everyone also. I'll talk about that later with the other FIAF archives. The cooperation from producers has not changed that much. We have a good relationship with our producers, and we have a sheet that they have to fill out telling them exactly what to give us. We have a a film funds liaison who can help guide them to understand exactly which files they need to give us before they send them in. We agree on what they're going to send, then they send it, then we check it. So it's working out fine. And of course, that the fact that they need to do all this before they get their final payment from the funding body is a nice sort of a ransom, you could say. So that's in a nutshell. In general, I wanted to say something about the FIAF archives. That's 187 members, and it's in 80 countries. So it's a very wide group of cooperating archives. The maturity rate in collecting digital is very, very different. Some of the larger and more established archives already have tape robots, LTO systems, and are well on their way to collecting all the born digital material in their countries. But other countries haven't gotten to that point and might not get to that point because it's an extremely expensive startup moment. Some countries are only collecting hard drives and not able to do much more than that. And I'm really concerned that globally we're going to miss out on a whole bunch of films from the early digital days, which already in theory should have gone through. If you think that 2012 was, or around that time was the first set of digital films, or the rollout of digital films, then those should have already gone through a few migrations. And I'm concerned that we're going to lose a lot of beautiful artistic works in these first decades of digital film. And I think that that's the biggest outstanding problem, to wrap up, that I can say in born digital films for us right now, is that the life cycle, the sort of reaction time for digital films doesn't match planning cycles for archives. So in many countries, it's possible to get a huge bunch of money maybe once, and people were able to luckily buy scanners and set up digitization workflows. But the sort of long-term digital preservation that's required, the sort of idea that you need to have a 50 or 60-year plan, or even a 15-year plan, doesn't match funding cycles or government cycles, changing economies, changing governments, changing climates. So we're losing that long-term continuity in digital films. I think that's all I'll say for today. Thanks, Richard, for inviting me to be here. Bye.
Okay, and let's switch now to the second clip by Thomas Christensen. He has more or less the same role as Anne at I, but he's working at the Danish Film Institute.
Hello, my name is Thomas Christensen, and I work at the Danish Film Institute in Copenhagen, where I am curator, and I am also a film historian and have been very involved in a big digitization project on Danish silent cinema over the last 5 to 6 years. So thank you, Richard Wright, for inviting me to provide some input on digital collection and preservation of cinema files. I would say that we in Denmark have had legal deposit for cinema heritage since 1964, and over the years both the quality and the administration of the legal deposit has been improved. With digital, many things have become easier because the assets are cheaper to produce, and I would say that since cost is of the essence for digital collection and preservation, at least the acquisition of the cinema masters have become easier. Also, I should say that most of the theatrical films in Denmark, both feature films and documentaries, are subsidized by the Danish Film Institute, and therefore we not only have legal deposit, but we also have contractual deposit, and the last payment of about 20,000 euro is withheld from the production company until the preservation package has been delivered. And this is, of course, great incentive for producers to deliver a preservation package. Most of the longer-lasting and historical film companies are very aware of the value of preserving their productions, whereas it sometimes is a matter of doing a bit of coaxing for newer and first-time production companies who don't always find that the balance between the preservation needs and the cost of delivering is worthwhile. But all in all, I would say many things have become easier, not necessarily cheaper, with the advent of digital. Also, I think for preservation, it's not really a matter of the technology. The technology is known, and just like I in Amsterdam, we hold about and preserve about 5 petabytes of original material, and since 2011, 2012, pretty much everything newly produced has been digitally produced. We create, or we receive in the matter of 0.5 petabyte of data per year, about half of it new productions and the other half something where we're digitizing retroactively the collections that we hold. So while it's not a technological challenge to preserve film heritage, I would say that the main challenge in this is to ensure ongoing funding, and the fact that we have to migrate everything, hardware, software, and assets in a 5-year cycle. This does become something where we have to argue for what we consider the obvious, but it's not always something that political level or top management level is aware of, the fact that this is a large ongoing cost. So I would say that's the main obstacle. It's less the administration and less the actual acquisition, and not the migration and preservation, but the financing of those activities. That's the challenge. And lastly, I would say that while new productions are produced digitally, of course we have a very large analog heritage that also needs to be preserved in analog form in good cold storage facilities, which is also something that you have to ensure ongoing financing for. I hope that kind of covers the questions that you wanted to have answered. enjoy the seminar.
So Thomas actually makes a nice bridge towards the last video, which is a testimonial from Rosella Catanese from the University of Tuscia. Most people don't know where Tuscia is. Tuscia is at the north of Rome, between Lazio and Tuscany, beautiful region. And she is involved in a project in Italy studying the preservation circumstances of analog film in Italy.
Hello everyone, and thanks Richard for the opportunity to contribute to this panel. I'm an academic researcher. My name is Rosella Catanese, and I'm here to talk about the Italian film heritage. And cinematics have to face the new challenges of digital technologies like all the other countries. As for the Italian institutions, we have very important and well-established cinematics, such as the Cineteca Nazionale, that is also established as the deputy archive for the compulsory deposit since 1949. Now with digital, we are offered new promises. On one hand, with new scanning technology, we can recover something that was previously considered impossible to save. On the other hand, unlike film, digital corruption can be invisible and more difficult to be contrasted. Many people think that digital technology is green and good for the environment, but digital archives have their own environmental costs. Also, digital files are not stable on their own. They need constant care. And the Italian ministry, for instance, have funded extensive digitization projects open to all archives. But these projects usually focus on scanning materials, not on preserving the original items. So also not very much on maintaining the digital files over time. Thus, despite the benefits, the focus on digitization funding overlooks the broader needs of the film archives in Italy. Now I'd like to acknowledge the research that is coming out of a ministry-funded project, SAFE, a study on the sustainability of Italian film heritage, led by Simone Venturini at the University of Udine and coordinated at the University of Tuscia by me. This research has mapped the infrastructure challenges facing both analog and digital preservation in Italy, with a focus on non-fiction and non-theatrical heritage. The corpus of the SAFE project is made up of non-fiction, non-feature, and non-theatrical film heritage institutions, rather than focusing on the already established mainstream film heritage. We cooperated with a community of more than 20 archives facing different issues. Some align with international standards and federation. Others operate at the margin of institutional frameworks. Well, non-fiction, home movies, newsreels offer a vital lens on collective memory and identity. Yet this heritage remains marginalized within institutional hierarchies. SAFE had three main objectives. Monitor and analyze the infrastructural sustainability of conservation centers, survey the status of digital preservation practices and protocol, such as investigate the state of the art, standards, procedures of digital preservation and data migration, integrity, and so on, while estimating the costs of digital storage. The project questioned the assumption that digital equals sustainable. The third axis is stewardship strategies, understood as ethical and curatorial responsibility to rethink care, mediation, and narratives. We carried out a variety of research actions. We ran workshops to align with partner and international experts. Then, in collaboration with TechnoL, our scientific partner, we conducted a 12-month microclimatic monitoring program. For the monitoring program, institutions were selected according to geographical and historical institutional criteria, for instance, north, center, south, or also sides of the entity. Then we conducted a survey to examine the organization, the policies, and practices of over 20 Italian institutions. So we aimed at investigating principles, standards, and critical issues. Also assessing the technological, infrastructural, and cultural sustainability. The survey also addressed digitization practices, file formats, data integrity, and cataloging systems. Besides, policies for conservation, access, valorization, relations with community and stakeholders, and so on. All the data collected are made available in the project's digital atlas. a platform presenting the project result in these 3 sections you see. I invite you to check the website. Then we decided also to pursue ethnographic inquiry through fieldwork, interviews, site visits, and participant observation. So engaging with people and spaces, something that revealed institutional histories, genealogies, and curatorial priorities. Here you see some of the definitions of film preservation that we asked all archives to state. So thank you very much. I hope we can keep in touch.
Okay, that was Rosella's testimonial. I think she makes a very interesting bridge to the main subject of this panel. And I would like, as we have been talking today a lot about broadcast archives, and we're switching more now into independent production, film world, I would like to start off with an introductory question, and particularly for Sarah, because Sarah, you have worked at the BFI in a previous role. Now you are at INA. So you know, I mean, we all know the role of BFI in television preservation in the UK, but you've seen both sides. And my question would be like, what is fundamentally different about preserving digital cinema compared to broadcast content?
Yeah, I think it is, on one hand, it is actually very similar because the materiality of like audiovisual or cinema works is the same. So a film strip is a film strip, regardless of what's on it, and digital material is digital material. So there are a lot of similarities. However, I think there are 2 very important differences. The first one is a question of volume. So the volume of works preserved, here I'm going to talk about INA, is massive. Not only because of the analog and more like traditional collection, I would say, because here we have, in terms of film collection, we have 100,000 hours of program. So that's starting from the 1920s with like the French actually news that they were showing before the cinema, up to the 1990s. So the majority of our film collection is from 1954 until 1994. But because the largest part of our collection is actually from a legal deposit and of a recording, where we have over 30 million hours of content. Here, one thing that's also very important, and when we realize the volume is important, is because like broadcast or archive are going to talk a lot about like content, whereas on the contrary, film archives are going to talk about works themselves, and they're going to talk about individual works. And we can see how like TV archive will say, oh, we have X number of hours, whereas film archive will say, oh, we have X number of titles, and these are the important titles. And we heard when Anne Gant said, oh, we receive 120 films per year. So what they will do is they will work like one film at the time, whereas broadcast or archive will like process a batch of film and will tend to do like more mass scale digitization. So that's in terms of volume of number of things. However, still talking about volume, because a lot of what TV archives have can be can come from video, or can be like low SD or low res quality. So one single work might like weigh, digitally speaking, less than a single work that a film archive will have, because they will get either the masters, so the raw and uncompressed material, and when they digitize, they will digitize at least at 2K, if not 4K, and now they are trying to digitize at 8K. So it means that you need a whole workflow to be able to work and grade and restore these kind of works when they are so heavy. So it's a different kind of constraint. So I would say, so volume is the first point. And the second point is also access, because access and reuse of the content, because broadcaster archives are not only the producers, but they will also be the first clients of the archive, whereas the archive might program, but they also have external client, but they will program like one work at the time, and so they will take out of the archive one work at the time, whereas, for instance, when I take INA, we have, so we're not a broadcaster per se, but we have agreement with like French TV and radio, and that we have to give them access because it's basically their archive. We have to give them access to the archive. And so overall, we take out of the digital archive over 9,000 works per week. I don't know a single film archive that does that. And so we have a whole automated system. Also, in terms of reuse of content, one question that I think is interesting for both archives, both types of archive, is when you do a restoration or when you reuse a content for social media, after what do you need to keep? Because I think there's a lot of discussion about disposal of analog and physical material, but not enough discussion about do we need to keep everything in terms of digital file as well. So if I take the case of INA, for instance, we've been digitizing for over 25 years our collection, and we had a first like massive digitization plan where today 85% of our collection exists digitally speaking, but not in the quality that TV or cinemas expect today. So we are re-digitizing. So do we need to keep all these threats of digitization or not? And when we restore a film, what do we keep? Do we keep the DCP as well, or just the master? Or when we have content that is used for social media, what do we use? Knowing that we don't want, you can waste time by recreating the same thing you've done in the past. So there's this balance between preserving for access and then preserving for preservation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. A few very, very interesting points. For example, the number that you mentioned of 9,000 times per week that this kind of content is accessed, it's definitely a difference. I want to get into a related domain for Piero and Stephen. So we also see the merging of the media. Film and television are ever more coming closer. Going to watch a movie in the cinema is going down in many countries, and on the opposite side, watching streamed content is going up. That's for sure. The question is what consequences does this have for the acquisition and digital preservation processes of both films and series purchased or co-produced by broadcasters? For example, Piero, you're in the world of independent film producers, and how do they preserve their content? At some point, they might be confronted with issues regarding the delivery to their commissioning broadcasters, streaming platforms. Yeah, hopefully, I have to say, because the problem of preservation in the world of production, the world that I know better because I was a filmmaker myself and I worked for 20 years as a director, and I went by many production companies in Italy, and I started to figure and to realize that they were accumulating hard drives and LTOs in their basements. The indexing system was a post-it, and in the best cases, and with the presumed parachute that is the national Cinematheque, the Italian National Cinematheque, which is in the same conditions. So they receive the hard drives and LTOs, they put the post-it, and that's over. So the preservation, going back on the previous panel, is the big elephant in the room. And nobody takes care of, because they don't want to see the problem, because as Thomas said, it's a problem of money at the end of the day. But I would like to add my personal view on what Thomas said. The money problem is at the end, I think. First, there is a cultural problem. So preservation is not in the radar of the people producing content. That turns into a regulation problem. So in Italy in particular, there is no regulation except send the master to the National Cinematheque. And this turns into the final problem. So there is no culture, there is no regulation, so
preservation is only a cost. And so with the new technologies, particular the cloud, and in this particular moment of our lives where we deal with data every day on a personal level and on an enterprise level, I think that if you can get back in control of your data, if your data is accessible and is resilient, you as a content owner, you can implement new business models over your data. But to implement this, you need a vision. And the vision comes going backwards from regulations to cultural. So the technical solutions are there. Not speaking about ourselves, but there are many of us in the world. What we need is, do we want to preserve our cultural heritage or not? This is the first question. And this question we can answer at the low level, like we try to do with our solutions, so give a democratic tool to anyone to preserve their media on a peer-to-peer way. So with no huge upfront investments, but pay-as-you-go, as many software as a service solutions out there on the market. And so we can start to solve the new upcoming problems, because preservation, the lack of preservation goes on every day. And so every new film stays in the same conditions as the past one, even worse probably, as we said that digital is not resilient, is fragile at the end. So try to solve the cultural problem will help the people to understand that they can invest their money and not spend money in preservation. Because if you have control of your data and you implement your business models, new business models, you can deliver faster, you can reach secondary markets that you are not able now, that is too much costly, because you need to retrieve data from an LTO tape and it will take days if the data is still available, and it takes money to do that. And so if you adopt new solutions, you can make money over your data. And this is, from a liberal point of view, is a good thing at the end of the day. So I think that the solutions, technical solutions are there. What we need is someone that turns on the light on a global level, I would say on a European level first, because we have plenty of funds. We had amazing fund to digitize the theaters in the past, in the last years, and all the theaters went from film to digital, and that was a vision, and that was good money spent, because the people then can achieve a better projection and the delivery of we can switch from a mono programming screening rooms to multi-programming screening rooms. So this enabled new business models for theaters as well. So we need to do the same thing for preservation. Starting from the content owners.
Yeah. Stephen, at the BFI, obviously you've been involved in what I would call more classic forms of film preservation. You've been involved in digital preservation of newly arriving film materials, but you've also been involved in the acquisition of materials from streaming platforms. What is your experience in this domain?
So for me, born digital cinema, some of the challenges we've talked about here, just to amplify some of those, for me the key challenges are, compared with the broadcast sector, the film industry is like a radically different production and distribution context you're dealing with. Broadcasting, typically, a broadcaster is a permanent institution. A nation has a few of them. Usually the plumbing for archiving is, like to use Kate's Scream quote from earlier, the plumbing is inside the house in a broadcast archive, or the plumbing is close to the house. So the data moves from the production and broadcast moment to the archive moment fairly efficiently, fairly quickly, usually with legislation, Our broadcast archives understand that quite well now. They understand the reuse value. In film production, outside of the Warner Brothers or the major studios, typically you get a film production that spins up for one film and shuts down. The people move on to another film, it spins up for one film, shuts down. Not only is there no plumbing inside the house is falling down, and you have to build the plumbing while the house is falling down to get the data to flow to the public archive. That's incredibly challenging for the filmmakers who don't have money to retain staff, to be archival staff, but also for the public archive to get at the right time during that production life cycle to grab the data before it's in someone's garage or in a loft or in a post house. The other thing I would say is, unlike broadcast preservation, the gap between the distributed file and the preservation ideal file is so huge in film, so huge that broadcast archives don't necessarily, I think, understand that gap. The difference between a DCDM, which is the archival, what we want, and the DCP is around 30 times bigger, 30. So when you distribute a DCP, it's capped usually at 250 megabits per second. That's in the standard. The thing you want to preserve is about 7-8 gigabits per second. So the gap is so huge, and the file sizes that you seek to archive are so large and difficult that for a film production company, the cost of managing that data set is really difficult to sustain. You're talking about over 10 terabytes potentially for a single feature-length film. So if you make 20 films, you've got a huge digital storage problem as a film production company. So all of those make film radically different and more challenging for the producers themselves to undertake good archival storage and preservation. And we see this in the BFI because we collect from industry based on film fund, like the Netherlands context and the Danish context. We fund production of films from lottery, and built into our deliverables for the final payment is a DCDM and a DCP for the collection. That is really hard to get from some film productions who don't, believe it or not, create a DCDM in their workflow. I mean, that seems anomalous. Surely you have to, but you really don't. They create that for us because it's in our deliverables, and they create it in anomalous signal chain methods. So there's a big educational piece of work to be done as well with film production companies about if you want your material to be archived, here's what you should think about when you're creating your workflow. Yeah.
Speaking of workflow, and this is a question for all three of you, what would be the ideal point in the pre-production, production, post-production chain to first start and implement preservation measures and preservation solutions? Sarah, maybe we can start with you.
You mean from the production stage for producer to do to start? I think because I think first it's metadata as well as the files because I guess like in the film or program content there will be what comes out of the camera in this film, then you have the rushes and then you have the finished work. So there's also all this question of like rushes. I'm thinking because we have a lot of rushes from older programs that are still on films. Because sometimes when we are in France, there is a law that says that producers have to keep all the materials that were used to the making of the film. So it means, and Ina being sometimes a producer, co-producer, when we archive material, we have to keep all of this material, not just the finished product. Mm-hmm. And so knowing what's on those rush is also important. So there's thinking about that, what you're keeping, and then also about what Steven said about like the quality, and that archiving is, it's not just a short-term project. It's a long-term one, and so you really want to keep the master material that can be quite large and heavy, and to then digitally to preserve. The archive has to have, or the producer has to have the infrastructure for it.
Yeah. Piero, you are in contact with a lot of independent film producers. If you could dream a producer, at which moment would he or she start thinking about preservation?
In prep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Correct me, sorry if I'm wrong. In France, the regulation says that preservation should be part of the production cycle. So you need, as a producer, you need to preserve some money to spend to service providers for long-term preservation. And this is very smart way to think preservation, because this is the cultural change I was speaking before. So if you have a regulation that tells you, hey, you are doing the film with my money, sensei in this case, you need to preserve 5 to 10 Ks to preserve your master for at least 15, 20 years. 5 to 10 Ks is the money you spend for coffees on a production. So I think they can find at no cost the budget to preserve, at least for the very first period, let's say the first 20 years. Okay, and so we solved the very first problem. Then, technically speaking, probably, yes, keeping the CDM is the dream of all the cinematographers, probably because they see probably the new future HDR format, and so they need the best quality, the most of the data available for future versions. But probably, during the years, probably we could save less data while keeping at the same time a very high quality. I think that ProRes 4K HDR is a very good quality also for long-term preservation of certain products, okay? But then it's on the producers, okay, I want more. I want to invest more on my preservation. But I think we can rethink a little bit also the formats we use for preservation, because we will never end to accumulating data. So the problem will stay with us forever, okay? So unless someone will invent some new way to preserve a lot of data at a small cost, let's say.
Yeah. Stephen, what would be your ideal moment in a film production when you would like film producers start thinking about preservation?
I think if you asked me to from a blank page, how would it work best between film production industry and archival final destination? I think the real way to solve it would be in the recruitment, or even further down in the training of the people at film school. So what I would love to see is archive embedding in film school to explain, if we do this right, everyone, your film will be safe in an archive for, we have Queen Victoria on film, 135 years at least. And you may not care about that because your mission is to get that DCP to cinemas to be screened. But you may care about it in 20 years, and a public archive can help you maintain and preserve your content safely. So push it down into the training of the people who then become the filmmakers and the crew. I'd like to see embedded in every film production. I know there's data wrangling roles in film production. I'd like to see archival roles embedded in film production. So push it as far down in the chain of decision-making as you can possibly do.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks.
It's easy to say, though.
It's easy to say, but we have a bunch of stakeholders here in the room, and I think me as a moderator, if I can allow myself to take a position, it would be that I completely agree with you, and that we have a role to play as preservationists. Some of us are teachers in this kind of training programs to spread this kind of word. I would return to Piero with a question, like. You have been talking about, okay, it's a matter of cultural change. There is also a financial perspective. In film production, often the moment that a film is evaluated is at the box office. We express the success of a film more or less in terms of dollars that it brings. What about archival afterlife and the changing business case of making movies? Maybe the revenue of a film could also be in its archival long tail. Is this a point where you work on, or?
Yeah, somehow yes, because we let our clients to implement the new business models that I mentioned before. So the lifespan of a film depends on the quality of the film, of course. So every case is different. But when the hot cycle, let's say, is over, it's not really over, because the world is big. It depends the cost of the reach, the cost for the producer to reach the other markets. Okay, so for example, retrieving data from an LTO tape today in Italy costs from 500 to 800 euros and will take 2 to 3 days, compared with a cloud solution that would cost 20 euros per month to preserve the data and 40 euros to deliver it. This is a change. So probably the producers will be pushed along with their sales agents or distributors to find new paths on secondary markets for the film, and making this lifespan longer and to get more revenues from it. So the things are changing, and the models must, and the production companies' models should look themselves and see if they are still, if they can still do the producers as they did in the last 50 years. Probably they must rethink a little bit the market side of their products, because if they can control their data, and now they can, probably that would be a new way to get more revenues for them.
Mm. I would like, we have a few minutes, I think 2 or 3, one left. I would like to ask the audience if there are particular questions in this regard. There are a few people here closely involved with film archiving, film digitization, at least for our audience. I'm looking around. We could also discuss that over a glass of wine. I want to thank our panelists, Sarah Vandegeerde, Piero Costantini, and Stephen McConnachie.
Thank you.
Thank you.